You ever have one of those days where telling the truth gets you a slap instead of a handshake? Yeah, that happened to me. It was a Thursday at the gym, smelled like sweat and rubber and nervous energy, and there I was, 14, skinny, standing off in the corner lacing my shin guards, just trying to blend in. Coach Trent was pacing the mats, shouting directions, full of himself like always, making sure everybody remembered who was in charge. But I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about my grandpa and the way he moved, like nothing in the world could surprise him that I should have kept my mouth shut. But one of the bigger kids leaned over and asked, "So why'd you start MMA anyway? You don't look like the fighter type." I told him the truth, voice barely above a whisper. My grandpa trained Navy SEALs. For a half second, the whole room went quiet. Then the laughter hit me like a left hook. Someone made a crack about my grandpa being a Hollywood stunt double. Another saluted and started humming the Mission Impossible theme. Coach Trent swaggered over, smirk curling on his lips. "What's this? Grandpa training SEALs now? You writing bedtime stories, kid?" I just stood there, didn't argue, didn't blink, just let my eyes drop to the mat and tried not to look small. Coach Trent didn't like that. "If you want respect," he said, "you work for it. Not by telling fairy tales." Next thing I know, his hand lashes out, crack, right across my face. Hard enough that I stumbled, but I didn't fall. I didn't even flinch after the first shock wore off. I just stood there, cheek burning, hands clenched, feeling about as small as the last kid picked for dodgeball. The room went real quiet. Nobody laughed now, and Coach just turned away like nothing happened. "Back to work," he barked, like he hadn't just hit a kid in front of everyone. That I finished the session in silence, packed my gear with the marks still bright on my face, and walked home alone. No earbuds, no music, just the sound of my own feet and the dull ache that felt deeper than skin. By the time I reached my house, the sky was bleeding orange and purple, and my grandpa was in the yard tending tomatoes. He didn't ask what happened, just opened the screen door and told me to wash my hands for dinner. That's his way, quiet, steady, like a river that doesn't care if the world is on fire. After dinner, he pulled out a coin from the old kitchen drawer, a military challenge coin, the kind they only give out if you've done something real. He slid it across the table, eyes never leaving mine. "You remember this?" I nodded. "You said only instructors who finished the full SEAL combat program got one." He nodded back. "You ever show this to anyone?" "No, sir." "Good. Some people don't need to know who you are until it's time they do." The next morning, Grandpa told me to get dressed. We were leaving in 15. Didn't say where, just that I'd need my gym bag. We drove in silence to the gym, and when we walked in, Trent tried to play tough again, cracking jokes, asking if Grandpa was my lawyer or just there to tell bedtime stories in person. Grandpa just walked to the edge of the mat and stood there, arms folded, quiet as a loaded gun. Trent got in his face, but Grandpa wasn't there to talk, at least not yet. He sent me to stretch and warm up. The whole time, I felt every eye on me. Some curious, some nervous, a few with that look like they wanted to say sorry but didn't know how. When Coach Trent tried to show off, calling Grandpa out for being old, Grandpa finally reached in his pocket and held up that faded SEAL Trident patch, initials stitched on the corner. "This used to mean something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but you could feel the whole room leaning in. "But it's not my patch that matters. It's the one your student tried to honor." Even Trent was caught off guard. The room shifted, you could feel it. Some of the kids started glancing at each other, like maybe they'd been wrong to laugh. But Coach couldn't let it go. He started up with the trash talk, telling Grandpa he built this place from nothing, trained champions, yada yada. Grandpa just said, "You built it on fear." And that's when the youngest kid in the gym, maybe 13, whispered, "I think that's Chuck Norris." Phones came out. Everyone started whispering. Trent tried to laugh it off, but the moment had changed. Grandpa stepped onto the mat, cap in hand, stance loose, eyes locked in, like he was about to give a clinic in humility. Coach Trent threw a punch, trying to show off. Grandpa slipped under it, pivoted, swept his leg, and had him in an arm lock before anybody could blink. Didn't hurt him, just held him long enough to prove the point. then let go. Trent hit the mat, face red, muttering about luck, but everyone saw the truth. Grandpa turned to the room, calm as ever, and said, "This isn't about showing off. It's about knowing when to stand and when to kneel, not because someone forces you, but because you choose to honor something bigger than yourself." By the time we left, word had already spread. Somebody had tipped off the press. Cameras, reporters, a crowd outside, people shouting questions. Grandpa didn't flinch, didn't say much, just told the cameras, "This isn't about me. It's about what happens when people confuse power with permission." Then he walked back into the gym, picked up a certificate behind the desk, a fake one, and asked Coach, loud enough for everyone to hear, if he wanted him to call the federation to check it. Suddenly, the stories started pouring out. Students saying they'd paid extra, been pressured to recruit more kids, threatened with suspension if they didn't. Grandpa told the reporter, "This is theft hiding behind a gym membership." And it ends today. After that, it was like a dam broke. Parents started calling, news vans parked outside, students posting their stories, screenshots, videos of Coach yelling or threatening. The federation revoked Trent's license, shut down the gym. But Grandpa didn't stay to gloat. He just went home, brewed tea, sat with me on the porch and watched the sunset, that old coin still clutched in my hand. You want to know what happened next? The backyard turned into a new gym. Kids started showing up, some with gloves, some with nothing but hope. No fees, no shouting, just respect and sweat and quiet encouragement. Grandpa didn't teach every move. Sometimes he just watched. Sometimes he stepped in with a quiet correction or a look that said more than 1,000 words. I led warm-ups, my voice shaking at first, then steadier. The coin never left my pocket. More stories came out about Trent. The news picked it up, the whole town talking. But for us, it wasn't about revenge. It was about building something real. A place where no one had to be afraid to tell the truth. Where strength wasn't measured in bruises, but in how many people you could lift up. Grandpa never asked for attention, never gave interviews. He just showed up every day, making sure none of us forgot what real leadership looks like. Quiet, steady, unbreakable. Point one afternoon, after training, a girl handed Grandpa a folder with signatures, kids wanting to rent his space, make it official. "Do you know why this works?" he asked. "Because nobody's trying to be the loudest voice. Everyone just shows up for the right reason." They asked him to teach them. He just nodded. Maybe not a few weeks later, the grass in our yard had bare patches where we'd worn it down training. The old mats, the beat-up gloves, the trident coin. I realized none of it mattered as much as the lesson. I asked Grandpa one night if he ever thought about opening a real gym again. He just smiled, said, "This is a real gym." When I said, "But with a roof," he laughed. "Roofs are overrated." You want to know what happened to the coin? He gave it to me, not because I was the best, but because I stood up after being knocked down, because I chose not to let anger turn me into someone else. He said, "Carry it until you meet someone who needs it more." So I did, and that's the story. Not about a slap or even a takedown, but about what you do after. About standing up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who's still too scared to speak. So tell me, what would you have done? Ever had to choose between staying silent or standing up? Drop your story below. Maybe you'll help someone find their own strength, too.